Welcome back to my studio. Today I get back to work on this piece and I'll talk a little bit about how I've gotten to here and what were some of the issues facing me. And I have a couple dilemmas coming up where I have to go one way or another, so I'll talk about that in today's episode. So this piece has come along actually quite a bit since the last video where I showed working on this. So I continued that whole kind of area that's going to be suggestive of the surface of the lake. Again, whether that reads as frozen or not, I'm not too concerned with that. And then I also blocked in the shape of this birch tree, blocked in the little shapes in there. And the dilemma that I had first of all is I'm not quite sure if this area here is bright enough. I think I'm actually going to need to go in there to brighten that area up. And the other one was with the birch tree. I really had to work at graying those colors down because when I put in kind of the more bright intense colors, it looked kind of like a candy cane or a barber pole. And so I think I'm actually not totally happy with these colors, but I know the best way to adjust them is to wait for this to dry, wait for the whole painting to be completed too, because whatever I do to other things is going to adjust how this reads. So I may in fact not have to go in and do work on it, but I think I'm going to. But then when I come in, I either come in and scumble or glaze colors over top to adjust the birch tree. The other thing that I decided early on, I was not going to put scars up on the birch trees, but I think they need that. I think it, again, is looking too much like a candy cane or a barber pole, and I think those scars add a certain amount of birchiness to the birch trees and breaks up this really kind of long tubular shape. So I'm going to have to, at some point, decide how I'm going to go in and do the birch scars. Now, I'm not going to do that now because I'm going to wait for this to dry. What I'm going to do today, I think, is work on these trees in and around here and kind of fully resolve the glow of the sun. And so I know, for example, that like this tree, so this tree and this tree and this tree are dark trees. This one here is going to be a birch. But I think putting the colors in the dark trees is going to be a lot easier for me. And once I've got all that stuff done, then again, I think the trickiest thing is going to be finding a way to do the birch scars that fit within the style and are readable as birch scars. And then actually getting the colors of the birch tree so they look like birches, but they don't look like candy canes. So I'm going to save the birches until I've got the other trees done. So I'm going to change the camera angle, kind of zoom in a little bit on this area, and I will work on these other trees. So this area in here, again, I think just resolving the whole sun area is going to make this whole painting just read a little better in terms of being able to judge areas based on how they're going to look at finish. So again, the whole idea of this stained glass type style is that these lines that kind of act as, you know, sort of like the leading in the stained glass, they need to be darker than the shapes that they contain. So I know, for example, in here, the interior of this tree has to be lighter than the yellow or orange of the actual lines that are containing that shape. And in terms of how light or dark does it have to be? Well, it has to be light or dark enough. And that's just one of those things that you gauge as you're going in. It sounds like the doorbell rang, and it rang twice, and that's probably my dad. So I'm going to have to pause this and get back to it in a few minutes. Okay, we're back. It was my dad. Actually, good thing as well because somebody kept pocket dialing me on this phone that I'm shooting with, and it turned out it was my dad. So when I heard the conversation of him talking about my paintings, I knew who it was that kept phoning me. Um, so hopefully we're not going to have any interruptions. Okay, so getting back to painting the branches or the trees. Again, I just need to try and keep the area inside the shapes a little bit lighter than the actual lines that define the shape. So that means as I go down, I can get a little darker and a little more into the oranges. And same with as I go up here away from the sun, and just continually gauging it against how dark or how light those lines are that kind of are suggestive of like the lead glass. Okay, clean my brush. And I'll just try and gradate this out. Now I'm just using the plain paint. I don't have any impasto medium in the yellows, but I do have impasto medium in the reds, just a little bit. And that's just because the reds in the water-soluble oils, I imagine they're probably the same in regular oils, take forever to dry. Alizarin crimson in particular, I mean, it can take a month for not even that thick of a stroke of alizarin to cure totally. And I don't need this painting right away, but I'm going to need it for my show coming up in Toronto. And there's nothing worse than having a little area that just seems to take forever to dry. So typically when most of the paintings actually that I do, I'll mix a little bit of the impasto in with those colors that are particularly slow drying. And it's not enough that it really impacts the texture of the paint much, but it does just speed that drying time a little. And this one as well, I'm probably going to need to go over it several times to get the color and value just right. But that's looking kind of good there. Now I have to make a decision here too when I go from this area to the next one in terms of is it going to be a smooth gradation of color, and I don't think so. Again, I've got that going on in this background distant shore, but for most of them I want it to be a clear jump of color, and so I think I will start something of a kind of violet down on the bottom and going up to maybe a cadmium red light, so there's still kind of a noticeable change from here to there. I don't want it to be as though this gradation is happening behind the glass. I want it to be clear that this is a different shape. And then that will gradate down to this violet. And you can see already by putting that red in there and the yellow above it, how that also is adding to that effect of the glow of the sun. And again, I talked about potentially coming over here and reworking areas. There's two things that happen in a painting. Obviously, when there's not as much other stuff going on, certain things stand out a little more. But also, I find your eye tends to go to the last thing you did. And if you're not totally happy with it, then your eye keeps going back there, and you keep thinking, oh, I've got to get in there and change it. But sometimes what happens is once you do a bunch of more work and you move on to other things, and you let your eye kind of come back and assess it kind of normally, not with that inordinate amount of attention we give to the last thing we did, you'll look at it and you go, oh, you know what, it's actually okay. I don't need to go in and do anything there. So that might in fact happen to the birches, but I kind of doubt it. I think I'm going to have to go in and do some adjusting on the colors of the birches, and I think I'm going to go in and put the birch scars on. But there's a chance I might not. All of that stuff is always kind of open to what happens on the rest of the canvas, and then how my eye perceives that ultimately at the end of the painting. That's why I don't get too caught up with going in and reworking things at this stage of the painting, because the end, again, it's going to look very differently when the entire painting is finished than it does now. Okay, so maybe I'll just do these couple over here, and then I'll come back when I've got more of the work done. Now, as we move away from the sun too, it's going to get into more of the browns as opposed to the pure hues. And then even into purples on the shadow side of trees. But yeah, this is a kind of a light brown that I'm painting in there. And again, I want this to be a little different from the one above, so let's go into more of a yellowish tone into that brown. And I like the way that violet looked in the other shape, so we'll put a little of that up top here as it goes away from the sun, and then back into the magenta. And I think I'm going to kind of call this for today in terms of the live portion of watching me paint. And we will come back when I've got a bit more done. So you can see now I've got an awful lot done. Most of that area around the sun is resolved. I'll actually put a photo up here, a close-up, so you can see even in more detail. And I'm going to call it for today, I think, but tomorrow I'm planning on having a full day marathon painting session. So hopefully most of this painting is going to be resolved tomorrow. Knock on wood. So I hope you've enjoyed this and found it helpful. If you have, please give me a thumbs up and like the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and please pass the word on to your friends. I welcome your comments and questions. Oh, and just one other thing. We just recently crossed 1,000 subscribers, so that's super, and thank you to all of you who have subscribed and who have helped spread the word. And so now I guess we're on the way to 10,000. So let's see if we can do that. So thank you very much, and I will see you next time. I'm Tim Packer.